Welcome to NFL Daily, where our favorite practices are joint practices. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, and I am wrapping up the week with my friend who I was in the studio with earlier. Then I was in Oxnard, California without her, and now she's in Minnesota, and I'm talking to her from across the country. Jourdan, you know how people say like dance like nobody's watching? Today I want you to podcast like you've just taken antihistamines before the show, because it really worked for you last time out.
I know, man. That might be the formula, moving forward. We've had a fun week, haven't we, Greg?
It was all legal and it was all excellent. You just weren't, you were on some cold medicine, and I think it worked out great. So I'm really excited for this show. We've had lots of different types of shows this week, and we're going to get back more into the nitty gritty practice news element. Jourdan watched 2 days of joint practices between the Vikings and the Patriots. So we're going to dive a little deeper into those two teams and what you saw, Jourdan, to start the show. But we're also going to go all around the league. There's joint practices this week, and all the coaches say it. These are the most important days of the entire summer. So we're gonna take them seriously. I think there was about eight or 10 different joint practices, and we're gonna go through some notes. And so we'll hit a lot of your teams today, and then we'll hit some players at the back end. We're crossing a lot of boxes here that could be possible cut or trade candidates. Now that's not going to happen for about a week and a half, but I thought this would be a good time to go over some guys I'm just kind of eyeing as possible cut or trade candidates. But let's start with the Patriots and the Vikings. You spent 2 days there. Not every joint practice is 2 days long. You're still there, but I mean, you got to watch
when
them
this runs. I will still be
field.
here. Yeah.
I'll give you a hard question. All right, what's your number one takeaway? You have to pick one thing from these two practices to start that you think the listeners have to know.
Well, as you know, in this scary, frightening brain of mine, there's never only one thing.
That's what I mean.
At one time.
We'll get to the rest, but what's the most important?
This defense for the Vikings is so sick. Oh my God. I mean, okay, so I'm working on a project, and I spent the first day of practice. They split fields, and it was the Patriots' first and second and third team offense going against the Vikings' first, second, and third team defense. This was the first day of the joint practices on Wednesday of this week. And it was really cool. It gave an easier way to split fields. My colleagues, Alec Lewis and Chad Graff, they went over to the other field, and they were watching some J.J. McCarthy, a little Patriots defense action. But I was staying, and I was sort of charting this malleable amoeba, multiple personality Brian Flores defense. And I know we've talked a lot about how much we love this defense on the show, but it's so interesting because they took the floor of a group that was already so high, and they ratcheted it up like 3 or 4 notches. Like, to watch it in person, the nonverbal communication, the rotations, the multiplicity of not just one, not just two, not just three, but so many players on that defense, the coverages. They played the Patriots offense very, very interestingly. They were trying to be as live as possible in order to get that competitive feel, to have Brian Flores calling as realistic of a defense as he would, obviously without being able to hit the quarterback, and totally full contact, still plenty of contact, but without within the rules of legality. And then also having Josh McDaniels and Drake May and the Patriots offense go, how they would react to some of these things. I think it was really important for Drake May to see these types of pressures that Brian Flores likes to bring, and the unpredictability of what they're showing you versus what will actually happen. But I was so lucky, Greg, because I got to stand in the defensive backfield and watch from the coverage to the rush how this Vikings defense all fits together. And to say that it's special and aims to be special this year is an understatement, I think. But I also think that this is also a defense where you're underneath the roof where this culture is that it is okay if the defense has to, as you continue to develop your young quarterback, carry the offense a little bit from time to time. And that's okay. That is something that is very much in balance, and encouraged that this unit has its own entire, like I said, multiple personalities. And that's what it really is. It was fascinating to watch. My number one takeaway is how consistent they were both days. And we can get into that a little bit more, but that is absolutely my number one takeaway is this group is absolutely fearsome, one to watch. has some wrinkles up its sleeve as usual, but even more so this year as these guys are continuing to play together.
These are two of the teams I follow the most closely, partly because they have great reporters covering them.
Yeah,
and so
they really do.
This is a very well-reported joint practice. It seemed like if you're adding them all up together, and I love the Tom Curran Patriots podcast. I like Greg Bedard. I like the Locked On Vikings is a new one for me. Luke Braun.
The Alec Lewis show does a really great job.
Like it's everywhere. I've talked about Vikings Purple Daily. It seems like the first day the Patriots were happy. They hit a couple big plays. Travion Henderson, Mac Hollins has a big play. At least it was a little back and forth. And then day 2, more of a dominant showing from the Vikings. And probably from my perspective, hearing that the overall struggles of the Patriots offensive line both days to protect Drake May sound concerning.
Yeah. So day 2, I was watching, split fields, and they did split team drills as well. I counted at least 5 sacks, and I would say that I am very generous when it comes to what that would look like because the quarterback will be able to move more. They're trying to limit how much they're actually avoiding pressure with their legs in scramble situations because they actually want the ball to be moving through the air to get their plays off in a structural way. So I'm a little more generous. Some counted 7 sacks. I think that's really fair. I did definitely count 2 in the course of 3 plays during the 2-minute drives at the end of practice. This was the second day of practice. The offensive line for the Patriots both days was consistently very, very up and down. Now, this is going to be one of the best defensive fronts and also one of the most difficult to diagnose pressure packages that they face ever, not just this season or beyond, but like ever probably in their careers. So that you do have that little caveat. I will say when you're talking about sort of, some of the things that happened, Travion Henderson is so special and they absolutely put together an explosive on a wheel route. That was just really an excellent play through and through. The other explosive to Mac Hollins, that was a coverage bust. And that was more of a second team situation for the defensive side. Mac Hollins was like responsible for most of their chunk gains, which was wild to me. But Travion
He's a big
Henderson,
part of that offense.
Yeah, Travion Henderson was absolutely special. He stood out among everyone. But I will say that first day, the one that you referenced at the top of this comment, most of what the Patriots had to do was work underneath. Stephon Diggs looked awesome that day. He was working underneath. He was one of the receivers that felt really comfortable working the perimeter. The cool thing about the way that the Vikings orchestrated their coverages on that first day in order to, in part, make the quarterback uncomfortable, knowing their pressure wasn't necessarily allowed to get home all the way that they would like, was they pushed his landmarks wider than he wanted them to be. The way that they covered their spots and the receivers that they had to cover, they pushed everything out wider than Josh McDaniels wanted the spacing for the quarterback and the route structures. So he was often, when he was throwing mid-range passes, Drake May, he would throw to the perimeter, but it would be like a little bit too uncomfortable and it would be out of bounds, or the receiver would be trying to make a play and couldn't stay in bounds, or it would be incomplete. And that happened a few times on that first day. And then the stuff that they were successful with was short and underneath. And yes, they were able to move the ball in that regard. And it showed that Josh McDaniels is still very comfortable making his quarterback be patient there. But that was really all that they were getting outside of that wheel route to Henderson and then the coverage bust that they did experience as well. That was a touchdown. Mac Hollins punted the ball into the stands. It was a fun moment for sure.
It is an offense, I think, that's going to have to work hard for their points. And that's why they need Travion Henderson, because he
might be their number 1 receiver by the end of the season, Greg.
He's definitely their most explosive playmaker. Yeah. I mean, there's no one close. There's this weird idea in New England that like Stephon Diggs, because of the money that he made, is like some sort of number 1. It's like, no, before he tore his ACL, he was absolutely like a plus slot. He's a better version of Efton Chisholm, their undrafted rookie that I know is making some plays.
They found another one, Greg. They found another one. Because the fields were split when there were traveling fans. I was standing at one point next to this Patriots fan who was there with his father, and his father was, differently abled. So was sitting in a chair kind of off in more of a secure zone. And the guy was sort of narrating the practice to him, and Chisholm caught a couple passes with the 2s and then got some reps with the 1s. And this guy was so stoked about it. And he goes, "Oh, he's a variable guy. He's a Vrabel guy. And I was like, oh my God, because he was so excited with the accent, and I was dying. I texted you about this. I was like, I'm having the quintessential experience for a Patriots fan right now.
We don't need, I'm excited that this kid at Efton Chisholm almost certainly has made this team and might have a pretty big role. His biggest problem is their number one receiver, I believe, is going to be Demario Douglas. And, he's also a slot. So to get on the field might be a little difficult. But we don't need another scrappy, undersized white slot receiver to become one of their better players, because it's just too on brand. So the offensive line from
he's got to make the Rasta. He's got to make the Rasta. The guy kept saying.
To me, I'm concerned a little bit about the youngsters but it's a learning experience, as you said. On the other side, especially, and I know maybe you didn't get eyes on it, so I'll actually just speak on what I read was McCarthy. I think McCarthy in general, and this is just a time to talk about his camp because we haven't overall.
And I did watch him the entire time the second day, by the way. So go ahead. Great. But I did have eyes on him the whole time second day.
I think this camp, from the reporters that are there, have said for the most part it's been really good from a operation and decision-making standpoint, and not flashy. You don't have Justin Jefferson out there. And that maybe he hasn't been that accurate. And you kind of saw that in the preseason game. That's probably like the one thing that you could say. Maybe that's him coming off an injury. It happens to quarterbacks coming off an injury sometimes. But that overall, he's got it going. It hasn't been great. It's been solid. But the decision making and the operation and the same kind of held true on a nondescript first day where maybe the Patriots defense won more than the Vikings offense, but it sounded like the opposite was true today. And now Vikings fans who do not need a reason to be optimistic are spiking the football. They won day 2, because the important thing in joint practices, Jourdan, is to declare a winner. And based on the reports, it does seem like the Vikings won. So congratulations to the Vikings.
Yeah, it was interesting because he did definitely struggle. I debriefed with my colleagues. Like I said, they were over on the other field for the first day. And then we sort of switched places. And then I was eyes on JJ McCarthy in the offense the whole time. And it was interesting because he very clearly, based on the feedback that he seemed to get the first day, very clearly changed some things and improved day over day. I think when you're developing a young quarterback, that's really what you want to see. I will note a small caveat that like Christian Gonzalez was not practicing the second day, for example. So it's like different things. Obviously, Vikings are also missing the best receiver in the league, like their pure number one.
Gonzalez still week to week, maybe could return next week, but hasn't practiced a while. They did have Carlton Davis back this week for the first time, so that's a situation I've been updating every now and then, so that's a good sign for them.
Yeah, and I think with JJ, what was interesting is as practice continued, and they did a lot of RedZone work today, and they did a lot of like move the ball under time constraints, 2-minute stuff today. And that was 11 on 11, which is good because you get a real feel for how the lines are faring against each other. You get an understanding of how the entire picture looks. And so I was pretty impressed. He started a little shaky. It's interesting because the things that happen for him between the hashes in the middle of the field, he has just this laser arm and he puts the ball right where it needs to be. And as time passes, he got more comfortable with the middle and longer range perimeter stuff. What was interesting was when they were going through some of the spot throws and 7-on-7s and then got into the team periods, the middle of the field stuff, you could tell he's been working on his touch in terms of getting the ball to sink after it hits the apex of the throw. And so you can drop it over the top of a covering defender. You could tell he's feeling more comfortable with that when he's throwing to the middle of the field. It took him a few times. He sailed a couple. It took him a few times to get that touch going a little bit more when he has his wrist and his body at a different angle than facing the middle of the field. It was interesting too, because you could tell that himself in the center there, he's new to Ryan Kelly. He's working on, they haven't actually got a lot of reps together yet because Kelly's been like dealing with some things on and off through the spring and summer. And so you could tell they're also trying to figure out like where he likes the ball to be snapped, what kind of spin he likes on the ball in order to get it to pronate correctly out of his hand. Like you could tell all of these things just watching like the little details. This is quarterback development. And I thought it was super cool because he gained confidence as time passed in practice. And he was like floating by the time he got to the podium at the end of the practice because he finished so well. A couple explosive plays, 4 touchdowns in the 2-minute in the red zone period. And he felt good. The caveat here is that his best target today was Jordan Addison, who obviously he won't have for the first part of the season. And then Justin Jefferson wasn't there for right now. Might be back next week. Looked like he was feeling good with teammates on the sideline. And so the cast of receivers and the depth there is still a little bit in question, but he gained confidence so clearly as time passed. And by the end of the practice, he was feeling like probably beat reporters were saying better than he has looked and felt since OTAs and since training camp began.
Yeah, I saw a couple like, is this the best JJ McCarthy practice of the offseason? That they will not be saying that about Drake May, but I think that Mike Vrabel's probably happy about that. There was a little.
I think you're probably happy with Drake May after this. I mean, because he was calm. They threw some stuff at him. He stayed calm. He didn't make dumb decisions with the football. You know, he was sacked a bunch, quote unquote, but like he didn't make dumb decisions with the ball.
Yeah, that's the comment too. That I think poise and calm was a word that Greg Bedard used talking about this too. Like that a lot was going on in front of him, around him, and he needs his protection to be better. And you're not going to be playing the Vikings, a team like the Vikings, very often. But that he handled it all well. It's more that I think Vrabel likes the idea. Like they know this offense probably has more work to do than their defense, where they have more veteran players. They just have more talent, really, at all three levels. And it's interesting to me. I've noticed this with a bunch of these coaches, but Vrabel is one of them. That like Vrabel's spending all his time with the offense, and you think like that's a defensive coach, but he has basically parked himself behind Drake May for all of training camp, and is one-on-one trying to help this guy grow because he knows that that's the organization. So Pats Vikings, I like the deep dive there. Now we're going to fly through a bunch of the other joint practices, Jourdan. And so I have some notes. If you react, however, I know you've been in Minnesota. So, you probably weren't grinding any Twitter film on Jets Giants. My big thing there is just like Andrew Thomas is still not back. And the longer it goes, they sound like slightly less certain that he could be back for week 1. I've said a lot of times, like that to me is the most crucial injury in the entire league to helping their team. Second might be Malik Neighbors, who's very rarely on the field. Kind of need him to be a little more consistent because otherwise their offense is dead. And the takeaways from those practices, and they had 2 days too, was kind of what you expected. On both sides, the defense is just dominated. There wasn't many plays down the field. It was a lot of short passing. That Justin Fields was very conservative. That the Jets offensive line, which looked great in the preseason opener, was dominated in terms of the pass rush, especially. But you would expect that the Giants' defensive line is awesome. So that it was just a whole lot of defense, which makes sense when you think about these two teams.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel I have almost this like, pity feeling for when you're a quarterback in either of these two situations, and like you have to get your plays off the ground, and this defense also has to get its own install and its own work too. And so these joint practices, they become, especially against strength on strength like this, when there's two really good defenses, and then you are sort of, that's sort of where the advantage lies with the group. It sounds like Abdul Carter just continues to absolutely shine. I can't wait to see real football that counts when he plays. He looked awesome in the preseason so far. And like, you just hear these reports every day out of Giants camp about him that I mean, they absolutely have done it again, finding a player who could be very, very early to be saying this, but there's been a lot so far made of his talent, his ability, how he's popped so far against true competition as well. I mean, this could be really special for this defensive line. Now, the rest of the team, who knows? But yes, the defensive line is going to be rad.
Yeah, Dexter Lawrence was participating in team drills and is starting to do 11 on 11. So I said injuries are the most important thing this time of year. He's coming off the biggest injury, of his career, and he's the best. He's still the best player on that defensive line until proven otherwise. And supposedly in these practices, Brian Burns was giving Armand Membu and Olu Fashanu, the great, potentially young tackle combo for the Jets, the business. Let's go to the Dolphins Lions, which it's a rare time where it's just a decisive victory. But your colleague, Colton Pouncey, a couple of the other people there were like, this is the most one-sided that they have ever seen a joint practice. That was day one. By all accounts, the Dolphins fought back and made it a little more respectable, certainly on the offensive side of the ball, the Dolphins offense on day two of the joint practices. But you had to score the decision. It was over day one. A little concerning that it's the second straight week that we've heard that the Dolphins have kind of been dominated in a joint practice. Last time it was the Bears. This time it was the Lions. Let's listen to Mike McDaniel at the podium. This was after Wednesday's practice.
I didn't like practice because there was a lot of negative results tied to things that we've been working on in our process. So like, I'm cool with contested losses. I'm not cool with busts. I'm cool with, DB making a great play. I'm not cool with a receiver running a wrong route. Based upon their responses, we'll see how valuable yesterday was.
You're our McDaniel translator there. I know you're not used to seeing him quite like that.
Yeah, stuff's getting real over there, I think. And that's more frustrated, angry. I know his voice tone does like not change at all, but like that's more frustrated and angry than I think I've seen him. And there's always a couple teams every year where they come into the season and sort of the narrative drumbeat is going and you feel it. And I don't care if you say you block out the noise. I don't care if you say whatever, you feel it. The drumbeat of how many games does this person really have? How many games does this front office really have? How many games does this head coach really have? And so I think that's where you can tell, and the players will be able to feel it. You can tell. I am curious. It's tough sometimes to read the reports that come out of Miami, just because you're not really sure. I'm curious, obviously they were outmatched and outmanned, but I'm curious, are they playing hard once they stop playing hard? Because they played hard last year still through the end of the year, especially that defense for Anthony Weaver. And if they stop playing hard,
I don't know about the offense. By the end of the year, Tyreek Hill was refusing to come back into the game. And that is what is concerning to me, is that the offense made so many mistakes against the Bears, had an awful day. And then the Lions defense, which I'm letting myself get excited about, might be my Super Bowl, NFC pick. So I think the route for that is their defense, just going 2 levels up. And they do have these guys that I think if they're healthy can be good. And I was reading the practice reports of who made some big plays. Derek Barnes making big plays. I was like, oh yeah, I love Derek Barnes. Missed all of last
Remember
season.
that guy? Yeah.
Marcus Davenport. I've been hurt before by him, but if he's on the field, like he was winning his matchups up front, is a good secondary rusher for them. I'm not going to get carried away or anything. And I did think it was interesting. Amon-Ra St. Brown after the practice, and I saw one Lions reporter said like this was maybe as good a practice as they've ever seen like any one player have, just like his releases and everything. He was just dominating. And you can think about the matchups against the Dolphins secondary and think like, oh yeah, Amon-Ra against that team is going to be a disaster. And he said, unprompted really, we just offensively, we haven't had a good camp. Essentially was saying, it's been a little frustrating. There has been a little drumbeat about that. It hasn't been the offensive camp that they wanted, and that this almost was a release for them where they felt really great about it afterwards. One bad item was on Thursday, though. Sam Laporta, it was revealed, will miss some time with an injury. Not believed to be too serious, but certainly like the rest of this week and maybe into next week. So that was from Dan Campbell.
I saw Colton Pouncey, my colleague at The Athletic. I saw his post where it was like sharing the news, and then like an hour later, a follow-up that said, I can see people are already overreacting to this. Yes. I was like, well, it's about that time of year,
He also was like, Dolphins fans, calm down, because Dolphins fans today, it's like everyone gets into these joint practices. The players do.
I know. I don't post anything from them. I can't deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. The fans, how come you're not pointing out today the Dolphins were more competitive? It's like, okay. Dolphins have a number of injuries too. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were limited in some way in these practices, which, look, they're dead on arrival if those two players are not 100%. It's more the defense, it's the combination, it's the vibes. Eagles, Browns, maybe the most surprising result of joint practice season. Jourdan, I might give this one to the Browns. I mean, based on the reports. Just seems like it was like a draw. Like maybe the Eagles by a little on Wednesday, maybe the Browns by a little on Thursday. But if it's a tie, then you give it to the Browns. Unfortunately, Shedeur Sanders did not participate much, and it really looks like we'll miss this preseason game. And Dylan Gabriel had some good moments, apparently. Joe Flacco, though, was the first team quarterback, and I don't think they're going to play him in the preseason. I think it's going to be one of those games, Jourdan, where both teams really rest the starters, and Dylan Gabriel then maybe gets his chance to play at quarterback.
So I was looking at this, and it was like Kenny Pickett is still not totally recovered. And then there was something with Dylan Gabriel. I was like scanning it while I was walking out to practice today, and it wasn't. And so obviously he'll get his shot. But then Shedeur Sanders is dealing with the oblique issue. And then they obviously don't want to play Flacco yet because they would like him to remain healthy into the season. And I was like, what if they went from 4 quarterbacks to now you have to have an emergency fifth guy
Snoop
play in the
Huntley.
preseason?
Justice for justice for Snoop Huntley, man. He comes in there. He's probably like the second best quarterback in the room.
Pro Bowler.
Like, there is a world where he's actually right now the best quarterback in that room to win a game. I mean, it's all probably close, but like he could be. He could be. Yeah, we'll see. Dylan Gabriel, it's not announced that he'll start. He was increasing his work. I'm sure they don't want to risk him, but it was also interesting. I heard from our friends at the All PHLY show that Keely Ringo, at least for Thursday, and these practices are important, like appeared to be demoted, that it was Adoree Jackson with the starters. And then they have this 5th-round rookie.
Heard that call out. Adoree Jackson heard that call out from Vic Fangio.
Maybe so. They have this 5th-round rookie, Mac McWilliams, who's starting to move up and was playing like with or ahead of Ringo today. And they brought in Jacorian Bennett, and he's getting his chance. So there's some concerns there.
I would love a new corner in Philly emerging, Mac McWilliams in Philly. I mean, that's just, you got to do it. You got to do it.
I hope I got his name right. That was one that was off the dome. My favorite, I don't know if you saw this though, my favorite, the ultimate offensive line training camp picture today. I don't know if you saw it, that Landon Dickerson brought out a cooler of Miller Lite for all the Browns offensive linemen and the Eagles offensive linemen. They're out there, it's like 100 degrees, and they're just pounding a Miller Lite after practice. You're 300 pounds. That would be like me taking a sip. But it's great. Let's not take this too seriously. Tomorrow's going to be mostly a rest day. Like, let's have a beer on the field.
Yeah, that's lineman Gatorade right there. That's hydration right there. A Miller Lite. I think that's, I see nothing wrong with this.
By the way, the Eagles, they just seem like a little banged up. Like Lane Johnson was resting today. AJ Brown had a hamstring, was resting today. Mailata's been fighting through something, and reportedly their passing game wasn't amazing. And by the way, no one can block Myles Garrett. Even guys on the Eagles can't block Myles Garrett. Let's go to the Rams and Saints, who had a rare surprise joint practice. This came together last minute, and then the Saints actually put it on their website. Shout out to them. I love that.
Okay, I have a theory about this. The Rams, they try to close as much as possible in terms of like their beat reporter rules. Like, you cannot report on first or second or third team reps. You cannot report on any scheme, obviously. You can't report on like anything people say at practice. They give you great access in terms of watching and learning from it, but they're very strict, and that's a Sean McVay thing, a paranoia thing. Most coaches are very, very paranoid. But it was so interesting. I kind of think this was a little mind game, because the Saints haven't really been super open about their practices either. There's no fans at the practices in Irvine. And so it's like, Brandon Staley's over there. He kind of knows how McVay's mind works and all of that,
Ooh.
And it's like, you can't actually run your offense because we're streaming it. Like it's like any little
That's
advantage.
amazing. It's sort of.
I'm just joking, by the way. I'm sure I'm going to get a DM or a comment about how I should talk less because I'm full of nonsense. But yeah,
I love that idea. And I love that the Saints, they seem a little looser. We heard from the media there, a little more open maybe with this new regime, and allowing that is great for the fans to watch. The downside is when it starts going poorly. You know, I was texting with my friend Adam, our friend Adam from the Saints Block Party podcast, and he showed me, you know, the message thread on his Discord and everything, and people are apoplectic as they can't, you know, they're going, it's just a disastrous red zone period where they can't get anything done. But on the plus side, and I looked at all the reports and asked, you know, we looked around, and it really sounded like the defenses on both sides of the ball really won. So I'm calling this one a draw. Not enough information. I need to be responsible that the Saints actually moved the ball a little bit on offense, but it was like they couldn't finish drives, but that the Rams offense maybe had a little bit of a humbling moment after what went on last week. And you could actually tell by Sean McVay's tone after practice.
Oh yeah, always
he
mad
wasn't
when his
thrilled.
offense isn't doing
the Saints
what it needs to do.
The Saints defense was all over them too. So
yeah, that brought me. I watched some of it. It brought me back to 2020 when he would come to the lectern and he would be furious because Brandon Staley's defense had just kicked the crap out of him all through practice in like that truncated training camp period. And it's interesting. I love that this was sort of a throwback because we saw a really loose and connected and vibey defense when we went to Saints practice last week. Was that last week at this point? And then, but we've also seen a really strong Rams defense emerge over the last year and a couple months or so, and especially hearing some pop out of some of their reserve interior linemen. Tyler Davis got some pop from my buddy Adam Grosbard, who does a great job over on the Rams beat. And it's interesting that this was more of a defensive battle, and you know that had to just grind Sean McVay's gears like no other.
It did. I mean, by the sound of it, and I'm probably higher than consensus on this Saints defense.
Me too.
And lower than consensus, even though not that a lot of people are thinking about it, about their running game. This is on my radar, and it sounded like today they could not get anything done in their running game. And to me, with Rattler and Shuck battling, and by all accounts, Shuck keeps elevating, keeps having a good week, but Rattler is getting the first team reps. He is getting more of the starter reps, but they both reportedly had okay days today. But if they don't have a running game, it's like they are dead on arrival. Let's give some pop to the Saints coaching staff. I saw this clip today of Demario Davis talking to Kay Adams, and I was just like, wow, that's something.
This is his show. Like, he's the man. He's coming in and he's setting a whole new precedent and a whole new standard. And it's a joy for me to be able to be a part of it and come to work each day. I mean, I am a fan. I don't know if I've ever had a coach who I was a fan of. And I mean, he is very impressive. He is remarkably impressive.
And that's talking about Kellen Moore, not about your guy Staley.
No,
and
but
he goes
I love
on.
that.
It's worth listening to the whole thing of why he's so impressive, but the detail, the attitude, and I just love that from a veteran. All right, let's go on to the Falcons Titans. Don't have a ton here, but scoring this one from the Falcons, from all accounts, they just looked like the more talented team overall, which is not too shocking to me. And Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley, that connection reportedly is great. Your friend Tori, who covers the team, right?
Yeah.
Tori McElhaney. Am I getting that right? You say it?
You almost got it. Good for you, Greg.
I mean, you could help me out here. It's your buddy.
This is so much more fun. Yeah, Tori covers the Falcons for the Falcons. She does a great job.
And yeah, she noted, a couple of the position battles where Xavier Watts, the rookie safety, looks like he's winning that job. Probably D. Alford is winning the nickelback job. Mike Hughes. So these are the sort of things that can be illuminated in these joint practices. Who's really getting the consistent starter reps? Various reports in camps that James Pierce might be a little ahead of where Jalen Walker is in terms of their two highly drafted edge rushers. And then this was the most fight-laden practice so far that we've had. There were brawls, including one that started because after Michael Penix had one of his big touchdowns, and supposedly their offense was looking very good. That the first day he was talking his stuff and it started a chain reaction. And then he was in the middle of it, like apparently really fighting, which you don't want with your quarterback. He said that is unlike him. And that's maybe the first time that's really happened with him, but that he's from Dade. He's from Tampa, Dade County, and that you can't mess with him. And I like that. When you start saying where you're from, that they better not mess with me, then you're for real.
I mean, you know me, I'm a big believer in Mike Penix. I think last year we were just scratching the surface of everything he can and will be for that team, not just as a quarterback, but as a leader and somebody who fires his teammates up. Leonard Floyd was actually one of the first people to draw our collective attention to the fact that Mike Penix actually, despite if he protests about this, does talk trash, and quite a lot of trash. If he pops you on a play, he is going to be talking to you. That's it. Leonard Floyd sort of spilled the beans on that a couple of weeks ago. And I'm not surprised at all, because when he goes, he is so confident. Anyone who watched his Washington tape and stayed up late to watch those games would absolutely agree. I'm excited. I still don't know what this defense is going to be, but like we mentioned before, this offense is quite literally built to score points. So should expect that.
I'm worried about the Titans. You know, when the reporters
What
covering
year is
their team, I know, but when the reporters covering the team are like, well, the Falcons are just clearly more talented. I'm just, and the Falcons are really talented on offense. So, and I think that was the side of the ball that was maybe the most uneven, was the Falcons offense winning. And then obviously you have a rookie quarterback on the other side. Texans and Panthers.
I like how you say Titans, by the way. Can you
Titans? I'm overcorrecting because
I like
the
how you say
Western
that.
Mass accent, if there is one, is you don't pronounce the T.
Yeah,
That's
you're
Cam Newton.
You're like
Cam
2
Newton.
seconds away from just getting really, really fired up and excited about Efton Chisholm. So I can understand. You're trying to hold yourself back, Greg. I get it.
Falcons, Titans. Bye-bye. Texans, Panthers. I didn't realize like how tight CJ Stroud and Bryce Young were. I know they had the experience with the 1 and the 2 pick, but I didn't realize like their friendship really went back further,
Years.
like into high school.
Years
yeah.
and
so
years,
like,
yeah.
you know, going through all those camps, being those dudes, it was just cool hearing them talk about each other. And CJ Stroud really just putting on his cape for Bryce, which he has this whole time saying he's one of the best QBs I've ever seen, that's a bold statement, but that's a buddy. And I think he believes it. And considering how good you have to be to get to his level at his size, I get what he means. My biggest takeaway here was just Derek Brown is in full pads here and wrecking shop apparently against the Texans run game. And they're just bigger up front this year. And I think that's something that's been a little bit slept on. It was very hot there, Jourdan, and it sounded like a day there wasn't a winner. I'm not gonna call one here, because it seemed like for the most part the offenses were uneven but had their moments. So like slight edges to the defenses overall. But if the Panthers are even competing against the Texans defense, then to me that's a win.
Yeah, I love that. Go back. You guys would want to go back and watch this clip after Bryce Young was drafted by the Panthers. He like waited in the back area, like he didn't go rejoin his family quite yet. He waited to hear the next picks, and when CJ Stroud was picked, nobody celebrated more. It was so endearing. One of my favorite things I think I've seen in football, just how pure and joyful the emotion was watching his friend. They grew up battling each other's reputation, essentially, like being compared to each other. They grew up at these same quarterback camps. They grew up with a lot of the same quarterbacks coaches. And I really love that they got a chance to reconnect with each other on the field. That's pretty cool to me. That's also what these joint practices and training camp is all about from a life perspective. It's pretty cool.
And this week particularly, it's where a lot of teams are wrapping their training camp portion of camp. So a lot of teams, it was really their last day at their location or with the current setup. Now we still got a while before the regular season, obviously, but I think that was the case there in Houston. One moment there stuck out to me where I think the Texans had been struggling most of the day, but got it going late in the 2-minute offense, and Christian Kirk gets a big touchdown, and CJ Stroud is celebrating. I just think Kirk is going to be so important to this team. They really need another veteran other than Nico Collins, because counting on the rookies is a lot.
I've
And
heard
D'Amico
good things.
Ryans, was the defensive coach, by the way, I was thinking about. Sorry. That like Mike Vrabel is spending all his time on the offense. That's all he's doing is watching their offense.
I've heard really good things about those two Iowa State guys that they specifically wanted to try to pair together, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Heard really good things about their camp, both of their camps so far. But to your point, you do want to have a more established player sort of setting the way alongside Nico Collins. So but it is interesting. I think they're going to end up with several very good receivers, at least 4, if not 5, once other guys get back from injury and all of that.
Cardinals, Broncos. I found it
Another
very
hot
interesting.
day.
Another very hot day. I found it very interesting that the takeaways here were both offenses won. That both defenses really struggled with the other team's offense. Now, it sounded like maybe it was more decisive by the Broncos offense. You know, they had a 70-yard touchdown to Devon Vele, who stays in that mix. And I mean, it just seems like he is gonna stay there. And you've heard a lot about Troy Franklin in this training camp, the second-year player, and some of the Broncos reporters thinking like this was Bo Nix's best day, maybe the offense's best day. So I'm gonna score it by decision. This is tough. It actually took 3 judges, Jourdan, because it was that close. Both offenses were great, and I'm basing on a limited sample size, so don't get mad. But I'm going with the Broncos. This is where their effusive media maybe help them just by a little, just the Broncos. But offenses both winning, so that's good for Kyler and Marvin Harrison too. Supposedly they look good.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Twist my arm. Being excited about the Broncos. I would never. Like.
Yeah. That your video we cut for social that did numbers. Joint practice news for next week. Commanders Ravens canceled. Sorry. But one that did happen. Packers Colts. And this was a defense's win on both sides of the ball. Now, a little bit of context is necessary. No Jordan Love. And then 5 of the top 6 Packers receivers are out right now with various injuries, which, one of them is Christian Watson, which we knew he's coming off a torn ACL. One is seemingly serious, Jaden Reed, who I believe is out of his walking boot, but seems very iffy for week 1. So your boy, Matthew Golden, is the only one out there. And so, yeah, they're struggling to move the ball at all against a Colts defense that has some talent. And then on the other side, reportedly, this is to me a bigger takeaway. The Packers defensive line just handled the Colts offensive line up front and almost gave Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones no chance whatsoever. And reading between the lines of all the reports, actually it was Daniel Jones that maybe made the more rookie-like mistakes under all that pressure, which is not too shocking to me. Whereas Anthony Richardson was more just not having an amazing day, but probably taking the sacks and hitting some shorter passes. So maybe advantage Richardson on this day, but mostly advantage defenses. So this one's a draw. The defenses both win.
Yeah, I recall Shane Steichen a couple weeks ago wanting to have more clarity, commenting he wanted to have more clarity on where their quarterback situation is by now. Doesn't sound like he's getting much of it. So joy of joys.
Finally, the Raiders and the 49ers, they had a joint practice, and I'm giving it to the 49ers because it sounds like the Raiders defense, like when I read something that Russell Gage is just having his way with every Raiders cornerback. Russell Gage, who's bounced around the league a little bit and is probably the 8th most talented, 49ers receiver coming into camp and is now like their number 2 or their number 3 because nobody's healthy. When he's dominating and the 49ers offense, like big day for your guy Pearsall. You can honk about him if you want, but Kittle, McCaffrey, it sounds like both offenses had their moments, including Geno. That was maybe closer to a draw, so that's good for the Raiders offense. But the Raiders defense, no shock. We just talked about them a lot on our last show. We don't need to repeat it, but losing a lot to a team like the 49ers.
Yeah, Ted Wynn, really great analyst over at The Athletic, was commenting on how good Ricky Pearsall looked. So if listeners don't want to believe me, believe Ted, who's right about literally everything, truly. So
I buy it. And fantasy football related, we're going to have a draft, by the way, next week, mock draft. You're famously
I'm sick
not a
that
fantasy
day.
person. You are not going to be involved. Don't worry. I'm liking Ricky Pearsall.
You could that could be a big antihistamine day for me. How about we try it that way?
I would love it. And a lot of times, like the less specifically you know about fantasy strategy, where players are going, the more I think it's kind of an advantage because ball, it's not that complicated and there's too much copycatting. It's kind of like the poker player who doesn't go by the rules, sometimes messes up the rest of the table. I think it would work. If you want to know like where the Raiders defense is at though, that trade they made last week for Thomas Booker, who was like the 6th defensive tackle on the Eagles, Pete Carroll confirmed today that he absolutely might start on the Raiders, that he's played really well. He's been playing with the starters, but it's probably not a great sign that like he's coming over and he's immediately one of their better players. And then, finally, Cowboys camp. One thing I didn't mention on our YouTube exclusive. So everyone go check out the YouTube exclusive. Some Cowboys takeaways, had some good interviews. It was really fun up there in Oxnard. And, if enough people complain or the bosses complain, maybe we'll put it out over the weekend as a podcast. I don't know. But for now, it's a YouTube exclusive. One thing I thought about watching Micah Parsons, like ignoring a problem, Jourdan, tell me if you think this is true. Sometimes when things are really going bad and there's like a big problem in your life or an interpersonal issue, sometimes if you just completely ignore it, that actually is a great way to handle it. I'm not even being sarcastic. It's a productive way to handle it. Because it seems like the Cowboys have completely ignored this man and it has kind of quieted down and I think everything's going to be fine.
I don't know that I think that everything's going to be fine based on the vibes when I was out there a couple weeks ago. But I will say it is a bold strategy. Let's just go about pretending that the best defensive player, certainly at his position, but one of the best defensive players in the NFL right now is just wandering the sidelines and standing underneath the crazy tower structure that Jerry Jones places himself in.
He's getting quality time with the special teamers. I don't know how much he has to say to Brandon Aubrey, but it was like him and the long snapper and Aubrey and the punter just chatting for like 30 minutes. So that's
it's almost like, are they trying to make him bored enough to agree to a contract? Because like, that, I don't know that that's going to work out for you. Micah Parsons is, they've played this out with other players in the past. Micah Parsons is a different dude. He uses social media in a different way. He uses his platform, his own podcast in a different way. He's represented by David Mulugheta, an agent who does things often in a very different way and in a way that puts his players to an advantage. This is going to be, I think, yes, it's a strategy. Let's see how it works out for him.
I guess I meant if nothing else, no one's talking about it for these couple of weeks. And
he's just fatigued. People are like, oh my God, it's still the same.
I just sort of forgot it even existed until I saw that number 11 across the field. And I was like, wait, is that Micah Parsons? Oh yeah, he's still here. Okay, so look, I'm loving this show. It's nice. It's loose. It's feeling like you took an antihistamine. I thought we needed more to this show. So I had added all the possible cuts and trades. We're going to fly through those at the end of the show because I think that's just good information. But before that, just a couple of news items for you, Jourdan. And there's not much to add on these. So I'm just going to let the people know so that they know that the Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice is expected to have a disciplinary hearing with the NFL on September 30th regarding his potential suspension that's coming from the crash that resulted in 2 third-degree felony charges. And that's all according to our insiders, Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. And I was like, what is this exactly? And you know what it is? It's because the Player Association and Rice are appealing the suspension, and the NFL, they could not come to an agreement. Usually they do, and things are changed on appeal, and there's no agreement. And so how that works is they have to have a hearing. And that won't be till September 30th. So he will be eligible to play in the first 4 games of the season. They play the Chargers, Eagles, Giants, and Ravens to start the season. Any likely suspension is just kind of figuring out how long the suspension is going to be, would have to come after that. If you're a Chiefs fan, it's kind of interesting because Eagles and Ravens, two of the hardest games you'll have all season. And Chargers, the most important divisional opponent all season, technically an away game because they're in Brazil. I guess if you were going to get him for 4 games, like that's not a bad 4-game stretch to have him. Then he'll go away for some time to be determined later, and he'll come back. In other legal news, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit found that certain claims made by Brian Flores, the former Dolphins coach, now the Vikings coordinator, should not be sent to arbitration. It's a ruling that basically says that the charges made by Flores against the Giants, the Broncos, the Texans, and the NFL in total should proceed in court. So that's going to be a court date in the future. One person that will not be having a court date in the future, we learned, is Quinshon Judkins. So this is definitely something that the Browns will be interested to find out. Their rookie running back will not face charges for misdemeanor battery after prosecutors decided not to move forward, according to the Broward County Attorney's Office memo obtained by NFL Media on Thursday. Now, he was arrested. There were various reasons listed why they declined to proceed, believing that they could not have a conviction. Primarily, there's no video evidence. There were other reasons, but that gives the NFL a bit of an answer, and now they can proceed with how they possibly want to suspend Judkins or not. We'll see. He's still unsigned. All right, we're gonna go to the cuts and the trades. That's just like getting the business out of the way.
Hypotheticals. Let's not make anyone panic here.
What? These cuts and the trades. Yes.
Yeah, these are Greg,
that was
Greg
news.
hypotheticals.
That was the hard news. This is my speculation that I love a little irresponsible speculation.
It's great. That's my favorite part of Greg's season. You just can't go too many weeks in a row without speculating on trades, specifically trades. Cuts you could do whenever. I think you could take or leave cuts, but trades, you love a trade.
Okay, well then let's start with the team you just watched, the Patriots. They weirdly, I think, have the most amount of notable players that could be cut or traded, at least that I could come up with. Kendrick Bourne is hurt right now. Could he have a market at the contract that he had for a team like San Francisco? Like a late round pick swap market? Maybe. I think he'll be on an NFL roster. Like he could certainly make the 49ers right now. He could make the Saints right now. I think he will be on a team. I don't think that team's going to be the Patriots personally. Jalen Polk, a 2nd-round pick from a year ago. I absolutely think a team out there could want to rehab his career. The problem is he has an injury. We don't know how serious that injury is. Anthony Jennings has a lot of good tape and some people that he's played under rather. I think he could absolutely be on a team this year. I don't know if he's going to make the Patriots. And then I know you saw Kyle Duggar. Well, what did you see from Kyle Duggar the last couple of days?
Yeah, it's so the second day of practice was when I mostly was able to watch Kyle Duggar, and then the defense collectively seems a little bit like an odd man out and gave up a couple plays as well, including a touchdown. So that's tough, right? I mean, talking to the beat writers too, they very much think that he is a big trade candidate. The contract makes anything a little bit tricky, but there was a lot of conversation about how Mike Vrabel has methodically moved away from some, if not all, most of the Belichick era, the late Belichick era players, and has sort of wanted to reinfuse his own guys he's familiar with, guys that they drafted, specifically Mike Vrabel is drafting or having a large say in drafting. So I definitely think among all these guys, he's certainly someone to watch. The Jalen Polk situation is interesting because of the injury. It might be more beneficial for the team, and because of the nature he's still on his rookie contract, to IR him for the year, season-ending IR, and then sort of revisit the topic in the spring, especially considering they don't really know how the rest of this receivers room is going to pan out.
That makes a lot of sense. And Duggar is a guy who played with such aggression. The thing I don't love to hear, and will make it tough to trade. If they traded him, they have to take on like the guaranteed money in his contract. He has a lot of money due him this year. I think it's 8 or 9 guaranteed. They would have to take on a lot of that money, and the other team would potentially take on the rest. Is that an aggressive player who's had a couple surgeries now, and maybe he is just not able to play with the same sort of level of explosion that he did before? I'll be irresponsible here. This is probably more of an in-season trade, but I do think Tyreek Hill is a guy that Jeremy Fowler, a reporter for ESPN, said that other teams around the league are talking a lot about Tyreek Hill, whether this guy could be available. I think if you're just looking at like a big old name, that's like, ooh, that's a surprise. It won't be a surprise. You want to know why, Jourdan?
Why, Greg?
Because you listen to NFL Daily. You could kind of
found out a lot of people found out, on the ground in Minnesota. A lot of people. I'm stoked to hear how many. I was there for The Athletic. I was stoked to hear how many listeners are around.
Like what? Who are we talking? Media people?
I'm not telling you. You already know.
Not
I told you already. I'm not going
with
to
the
tell
team
you.
High up,
Not going to
middle
say
up.
it. I already told you. You're baiting me. I already told you. Not going to do it. Not going to do it.
Let's go big names down. Remember Trey Hendrickson? He's still holding out. I don't really think the Bengals would consider trading him or cutting him, but I just wanted to mention he is out there. Will Kenny Pickett actually make the Browns? Like, why keep 4 quarterbacks? Maybe he can enter this race again next week, but by then the race is over. It's going to be Joe Flacco. I'm breaking the news right now. That's not official. No one's reporting that. I would, stand on the tiny table. Let's put it that way and say Joe Flacco is starting week 1. So then, why keep Kenny Pickett? I don't know if it's a trade. This is more of a cut, probably.
I mean, listen, I still think Dylan Gabriel's a potential trade target because people did inquire reportedly into him ahead of the draft or during the draft and after the draft. And honestly, Greg, I got to say, I'm kind of proud of us. I will say this, I'm going to do the thing that's pretty annoying and obnoxious where I toot our own horn or pat ourselves on the back. We're wearing matching shirts, by the way. I don't know if the listener knew that. It's we're starting to merge into one mind, and I'm a little concerned about that. But it's Shedeur was exactly, if you watched him and you sort of understood you're not reaching for the moon and the stars with this guy, but he's got some tools. He's got some traits. Like I always said, he reminded me of pre, go get the bag, Shanahan system, Kirk Cousins, some of the traits and the tools, the short throws, the mid-range throws, and the way that he can move a little bit, the calmness that he plays with. And if that guy is emerging in a way that's natural and all of that, and you want to keep him, then there was already reported interest in another guy on your roster who seems to be struggling at times in camp too, So Kenny Pickett might be a cut candidate, but I still think that Dylan Gabriel might be a trade candidate.
Wow. I'd be stunned. I really would. Doesn't mean that you're not right here, that it'd be possible. I'd only be stunned because, how should I put this? I have tried to ask around about this. It's like, look, they took him in the 3rd round for a reason. That's not, I think you can say from the outside without knowing anything. That's not one where Jimmy Haslam is coming into the room and saying, take Dylan Gabriel, right? So the biggest decision makers on the team have a belief in him. And so that's all I'm saying.
And I know of teams who are not the Browns, who are not the Rams. Just going to put that out there because I think it's well documented by now that I was able to be in their draft spaces, but not the Rams, and who are also not the Browns. Other teams that were interested, were looking at him closely as somebody they wanted to bring in their backup quarterback's room as a developmental prospect, likes how he throws on time, likes how a lot of the concepts he ran at Oregon are very similar to a lot of the system stuff that we see prevalent around the league right now. This was a thing that was, it had not, I wouldn't say relevant buzz, but there were teams who were definitely looking at him prior to the draft.
I'm putting a few one and one together there, but they just seem like they would seem like they were so lost in the sauce if they're trading their 3rd round pick after the camp. But that is where they are. This is the organization, as I've mentioned now for the 100th time on some podcast over the last decade plus, that Charlie Fry started week 1 for, and they traded him before week 2. An all-time quarterback battle moment. I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but it'll never top that. He didn't make it out of the first half, Jourdan, of week 1. He was benched. I think it was before halftime or at halftime of week 1, the starting week 1 quarterback. And then they were so embarrassed about it, they traded him before week 2. That's crazy. So I guess anything's possible. That's amazing. I still am amazed. I was at Cowboys practice and I was wondering, does Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams make this team? So that could be like a quote unquote surprise cut, like one of those two guys. Trevon Diggs would be a very difficult guy to trade. That would probably be more in the season. But could he be on the way out? I just go through the rosters and I just look at names that like I can't see there in 2026, and I think like, okay, I'm not sure about Trevon Diggs there. That's just one I threw out. Total speculation, but the dots they connect. How about Jourdan Jennings? Getting like a little uglier there in San Francisco, and I don't think they're not a team that has traded. They need Jourdan Jennings, and yet this one would seem more possible to me than the normal 49ers situation, because he is not going to be one of their top receivers next year. They want Pearsall and Ayuk to be, and they don't want to pay him the money. Tim Kawakami reported that he's looking for $20 million a year, and they're like, I don't think they're going to get anywhere near that.
No, and he has been sort of dealing with what the team is calling a calf injury, but what Kyle Shanahan is sort of like sneering at when he's at the lectern, saying, you got to ask him. He told me it's a calf, and really the subtext of the contract is sort of simmering under all of this. I think multiple things are true here. I think he is 100% right and fair to want to get his contract redone right now because of Brandon Ayuk's injury and that taking the recovery now taking a while into the season or projected to, with still no real actual timeline for that, then yes, absolutely. If you're being expected to step into a bigger role, you should ask for more money. That's just, you should be doing that as a human. But it's also tough because the emergence of Ricky Pearsall, it's not just buzz. It's a real thing. I saw it with my own eyes. Other people are seeing it with their own eyes. It's a real thing. Now, I don't know that he's like going to be the full-time one, especially not when Brandon Ayuk is back. But at practices, they're putting him in prototypical one position without Jourdan Jennings, without Brandon Ayuk there. At the same time, Christian McCaffrey in the passing game, George Kittle in the passing game, your offense's bread and butter is still going to run through those guys, especially in the pass game. So it's a pretty difficult situation to be in if you're Jourdan Jennings, while he is very much should be doing this in terms of trying to get what he can and what he should get, being asked to be in this position. But it might get, like you said, it might get a little uglier before we're through here.
Would a team give up a 3rd-round pick for Jourdan Jennings and a contract? Maybe.
I guess it depends on what his actual number is. I mean, there's, it really does
if
depend.
He would take 2 for 36, something like that seems fair to me. 2 for 32. 3rd-round pick. I mean, it was Belichick's later days, but we've seen trades like this before. Like they gave up a 2nd for Mo Sanu in the middle of the season, like a late career Mo Sanu. So it happens. Jourdan Jennings is worth a lot. There'd be a lot of interest in Jourdan Jennings.
Yeah.
I believe. All right. Just ripping through a bunch of these names I wrote down that are just notable. When they started Travis Etienne in the preseason game and played him a lot, even though in reports in training camp he's kind of been the backup, I was like, is that a showcase situation? Travis Etienne is on the list. Eric Armstead, that would be more of a cut. Just hasn't been able to get on the field. Who knows? Marquez Valdes-Scantling maybe getting boxed out by our guy Torrey Horton in Seattle. I could see him being a cut. Trey Brown kind of falling down the depth chart in San Francisco. Trent Brown hasn't been healthy, the offensive tackle for the Texans. Luke McCaffrey, because of the connections between like
Adam Peters and
Adam Peters. Like I don't think they'd want to cut him, but it sounds like if it wasn't for the 3rd-round pick status, he probably would be a problematic. Whether he makes the team or not. Deonte Banks, Jalen Hyatt, those would be surprises with the Giants, but maybe a trade or a cut. Sky Moore, Peyton Turner is with the Cowboys, former 1st-round pick of the Saints. Isaiah Foskey is a guy who was taken quite high in the 2nd round just a few years ago. I don't think he's making that Saints team, so that's always interesting. The people that you passed up for him, our friend Adam had reported that other members of that front office, Jeff Ireland specifically, wanted to take Brian Branch there, and Mickey Loomis came over the top and made them take Foskey.
Oh.
Whoops. And that's it. My eyes are on the Joe Mixon situation, but it wouldn't make sense to cut or trade him because, like, what would the point be? No one's going to trade for him. What would the point be?
Isn't it? It's like, is that unless I missed something massive today when
it's
I was
just an
at
injury
practice?
situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's had some of his best year, his best time there when he's healthy. So I just hate it for him because that was so out of his control, the hip drop that got him hurt before and then having a setback. It just stinks, good player.
Those are your potential cut candidates,
This is
trade candidates.
the
We're
Gregg,
about
the
2
Gregg
weeks
list
out.
of Gregg hypotheticals.
Well, we're 12 days away as we're taping this, Jourdan,
Oh my
from
God.
the cuts or the trade. So maybe this segment would have made more sense next week as we get even closer. But I wanted to be the first to do it. And I enjoyed this. I enjoyed going around all these joint practices and hearing how Minnesota is. Where do you go next?
I go to Washington next. So hopefully Luke McCaffrey doesn't listen to this podcast. So
I mean,
I go to Washington next. I'm really excited because a couple conversations scheduled there about topics that interest me greatly. Some of the schematic shifts and trends we're seeing in the league. And I hope to be able to formally tell Frankie Louvu that he is the official favorite player of NFL Daily from the 2024 season. So
let's go. I mean, you don't have to qualify it with 2024 because then that, it makes it sound like we're dumping him. We're staying with Frankie
No,
Louvu.
I mean, we'd like to stay with him. It's an aspirational 2025, guys. It's wide open. Any takers,
It's fair.
Probably shouldn't have said that on a recorded podcast. So.
Stay tuned to this space. So I mentioned the YouTube of the Cowboys camp, so you guys can check that out. We will be back here on the NFL Daily feed Sunday night. Nick Shook and I breaking down all the preseason week 2 takeaways. You will also hear a 40s and free agent show from me and Daniel Jeremiah in your feed in the meantime. So we're cranking along. Jordan's all over the country, but she'll be back. When training camp's over, we're keeping her in that studio. But yes, training camps are kind of ending, and that's an ultimate. Football's back.